Hello, this is Spicy Wonton. I just want to share something really quickly about something read in the Bible, something that the Lord, something cool the Lord showed me. Right now I'm studying the Old Testament, and I'm reading from the time of David through the kings. So after David was king, then Rehoboam, his son, became king. After Rehoboam, then I think one of his sons became king. So I'm just like reading through, and I found an interesting story that I just want to take a few minutes to share with you. I'm reading from 2 Chronicles chapter 10. This story is about Rehoboam, who is Solomon's son, and basically what I got from it, I'm kind of gonna give you the main idea up front. I noticed that King Rehoboam has an opportunity to kind of foreshadow who Christ, the type of person that Christ would be. You know, like sometimes you look in the Old Testament and you can see Christ in one of the characters, or see an action that they do that reminds you of something that Christ later did. King Rehoboam here has an opportunity to be that foreshadowing of Christ, but because of his arrogance and his youth, he decides to do something opposite. So I'm going to read it for you. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm kind of just going to pick out pieces to help you understand what's going on. And you can read the whole story, and I hope you're encouraged to read the whole story on your own. 2 Chronicles chapter 10, I'm going to just start at verse 1. It says, "And Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had gone to Shechem to make him king. So it happened, when Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, heard it, when he heard that he returned from Egypt, then they sent for him and called him. And Jeroboam and all Israel came and spoke to Rehoboam." And this is what they said. So basically, Rehoboam just became king, and all the people of Israel are gathering around Rehoboam with Jeroboam, who is another guy, who is kind of like their leader, and they have a request to make of King Rehoboam. This is a request that they make. They say, "Your father," and his father is Solomon, "your father made our yoke heavy. Now therefore, lighten the burdensome service of your father, and his heavy yoke which he put on us, and we will serve you." So they're coming to King Rehoboam, asking him to lighten the burden of his father because it was too heavy for them. His father was King Solomon, who was the son of David. So this is what he replied to them, to their request. He said, "Come back to me after 3 days." So he needs some time to think about it. He needs to, consider what they're asking and see how he wants to reply to them. It's his first time being king. He wants to make sure he does the right thing. So he says, "Give me 3 days to think about it." A few things I want to point out to you. He says 3 days. Okay, that's when I read that, that's something that kind of piqued my interest. Like, I wonder if there's any significance or any correlation to Jesus, because he said, "Give me 3 days to think about it." But another thing that stuck out to me is that the people were asking that the burden that his father placed on them would be lightened because it was too much for them. And you would think that, if these people were just lazy, then the right answer should be, no, I'm not going to lighten the burden of my father, just learn how to work harder. But that's not what happens here. It says that King Rehoboam went to the elders to ask them what they should do. Now these are to ask them what he should do. And these are the elders that served his father Solomon. So they are experienced in their job. They're older, they're wise. He asks them for advice. And this is what they say. They say, "If you are kind to these people and please them and speak good words to them, they will be your servants forever." That sounds like good advice, right? But verse 8 says he rejected their advice, and instead he went to his young guys, his young friends that he grew up with, and he asked them what he should do. And this is what they told him to do. Let me just find it really cool. They told him to say, "My little finger shall be thicker than my father's waist, and now, whereas my father put a heavy yoke on you, I will add to your yoke. My father chastened you with whips, but I'll chasten you with scourges." So that is what his friends that were his own age told him to say. They told him to speak the exact opposite of what the elders told him. Speak mean to the people, talk down to them, tell them that, threaten them, basically use fear to try and get them to follow you. So guess what King Rehoboam chooses to do? He chooses to listen to his young friends. So he chooses to speak to them in a mean way. It says, verse 13, it says, "Then the king answered them roughly, 'My father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to it.'" And you know what it says? Verse 16 says, "Now when Israel saw that the king did not listen to them, the people answered the king, saying, 'What share have we in David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse.'" And that's basically when the kingdom of Israel split. Like King Rehoboam lost the support of half of his kingdom. Israel split and Judah became a separate kingdom, and basically that's when all the trouble started. But the thing I wanted to point out, the people were asking for a lightening of the burden. And when I read that and I began to think about Christ, I began to think about the law. Because we know that the Father gave us the law. He gave us this heavy burden, but he sent his son through to give us grace and to kind of lighten the burden, because the law is so heavy we couldn't follow it. So God decided to find another way for us to follow his will by writing the law in our hearts, and he does it through grace. And in a way, that's the lightening of the burden. So Rehoboam, what he should have said was, I'll lighten the burden. He should have been kind to them, which is how Jesus is to us. He should have pleased them. He should have spoke good words to them. And because it says that the elders told him that if you do this, these people will be your servants forever. And it got me thinking about, well, why do I serve Jesus? I serve Jesus because he showed love to me. I don't serve God because I'm afraid and because he speaks to me roughly, and if I don't do what he says, I'm going to die. I serve God because he loves me. He shows kindness to me. He speaks good words to me. Yes, he does please me, but I don't want to get too crazy with that one. I don't serve God just like the pleasing is not like materialistic things. He pleases me by giving me the things that I need inside, and he speaks good words to me. And so, I think that's kind of what Jesus did when he came to this earth. When he spoke to the people around him, he was kind to them, and he didn't just whip them with the law. And so I saw the people asking for that lightening of the burden. It's kind of like a foreshadowing of God. Excuse me. Kind of a foreshadowing of God lightening that burden for us by not removing or taking away the law, but like replacing it with grace. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to say. King Rehoboam had an awesome opportunity to kind of foreshadow who Christ would have been, but he messes it up by being arrogant and listening to his friends, which is kind of like, that's the spirit of Satan. The spirit of Satan is the one that answers you roughly. The spirit of Satan threatens you to whip you with scourges, to add to your yoke. And I just want to recognize in this story, God is showing us that the correct choice that the king should have made was to be kind to the people and to please them and to speak good words to them, not to threaten them, not to add to their yoke. God did not support the heavier option in this story. He supported grace. So this story shows that God is the God of grace and kindness and goodness and a burden lighter. God lightens our burdens when he took the law and replaced it with grace. So and I think the 3 days was seriously symbolic, because after 3 days Jesus rose again. He resurrected from the grave, and he turned that heavy law of the Father into grace, which is something that something that we can actually use to do the will of God. So I don't want to make this video too long, but I thank you for listening, and I hope that encourages you. Hope that you share it, and God bless you. Have a good night.